Now, I know that game week 1 hasn't quite finished yet, but there is already plenty to talk about. So in this video, I'm going to go through players to buy and avoid for game week 2. First up then, I wanted to go through the Draft Hound clean sheet odds because, well, I wanted to talk defenders first. Good defenders that I think you should buy with game weeks 2 fixture onwards in mind, basically. And looking at the clean sheet odds, what I've done here is sorted them by descending order from game week 2. So you'll see an order here, a rank here of the best teams for clean sheet odds for game week 2. Man City top. They've got Ipswich at home. Obviously, Liverpool have just kept a clean sheet away from home against them. Man City is 65% to keep a clean sheet against Ipswich in that one. Newcastle have got Bournemouth away, 38%. Then Tottenham, 33%. Wolves, 38%. Fulham, 34%. I would actually say the Tottenham game, in my mind, would probably be a little bit lower than that because I do expect both teams to score a few goals in that game. But looking at game weeks 2, 4 and 5, the Newcastle clean sheet odds are really strong. And at St James's Park, I think they could keep a clean sheet against anyone. They just did, of course, against Southampton with 10 men. Arsenal, yes, they've got some tough fixtures there, but that Man City game could easily be a 0-0. I just know how good the Arsenal defence is. What I'll do, actually, I won't go through all the teams. I've got some particular players that I want to select from, but you can see here the clean sheet odds. If you're sitting on maybe a player like Quansah, who you're not necessarily sure about is actually going to play the remaining games, got subbed, of course, at half-time against Ipswich, you may want to use these clean sheet odds as like a reference to help you decide which defenders to replace him with. So I've got a couple of 4.5 million defender shouts. Robinson of Fulham, I'm not actually going to show you his stats from this season because he played one game, didn't get a return and conceded a goal against Man United. But in game week 2, they play Leicester. Game week 3, they've got Ipswich. In game week 4, they got West Ham. I would say those are 3 pretty decent fixtures. Robinson, I say, is a really accomplished fullback, both defensively and going forwards. I think he should be decent for potential for bonus points. And they've got 2 promoted teams in game weeks 2 and 3. And I just feel like the promoted teams in the Premier League for the last couple of seasons have been so far off the pace of the rest. Ipswich, I guess, might be a different case. They've made a couple of quite exciting signings that didn't play against Liverpool but could well play come game week 3, likes of Sammy Smodics, etc. So they could be slightly better, but Leicester at home, they haven't made any signings, lost their best player in Dewsbury Hall. It's looking pretty bleak for them, so I would say Fulham could quite easily keep a clean sheet. And looking at their record last season, Robinson played 37 games and kept 9 clean sheets. And I'd say Fulham actually looked quite decent against Man United. They were good in possession and only conceded 1 goal from Xerxes. And to be honest, it was a really fabulous finish. It wasn't like a clear-cut, easy chance, apart from obviously at the end of the game where Garnacho missed one. I do think Fulham were pretty solid in that game. And like I said, Robinson is probably the pick of the Fulham defenders, the most attacking in my opinion. And yeah, I think with those game weeks 2 and 3 fixtures in mind, I think he's a really good option. Next up is actually probably my pick of defenders at this price point, and that's Lewis Hall. I would say, yeah, he's my pick of those 4.5 million defenders. Like I said, when going through the clean sheet odds, Newcastle on their day, they're very good defensively, particularly at home. Unfortunately, 3 of the next 4 are away from home, but I'd say the 3 fixtures away from home are actually favourable fixtures. Hall looks like he's the first choice left back now for Newcastle over Dan Burn. They look also to be signing Mark Gahey, which I think will only serve to improve them defensively. Obviously, Fabian Schär got sent off against Southampton, so he's going to be suspended going forwards unless that gets overturned. The one concern I'd have about Gahey coming in, I'm not saying 6 foot is short, I'm 6 foot for example, but it does mean that they probably lack a little bit of height in that defence when it comes to defending set pieces. So if they come up against a team that are pretty good from set pieces, it could mean that Lewis Hall gets dropped for Dan Burn. That could be something that happens. So yeah, that's just something to bear in mind, I guess. Exactly how they line up with Gahey coming in. I mean, you've got to imagine he still plays there. That would be my thoughts anyway. One thing I would say, he got a clean sheet in game week 1, so that's the stat to be interested in. But last season, he just didn't play enough games to have any real valuable data, so I don't have the stats under him like I do for other players. But what you can see there is his expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub, which are pretty decent. And clean sheet odds, they're all above 30% for the next 4 game weeks. So I suggest he looked really attacking during pre-season. I don't think the 10 men performance against Southampton is much to stand by, really. They had 10 men. They kind of had to completely change the tactics they played with in that game, right? But he looked super attacking in pre-season, basically playing as a left winger at times. And you've got to think in some of those fixtures, I'm looking like Bournemouth, Wolves, maybe against Fulham as well. He could be really attacking in those. I really like Lewis Hall as an option, and I think he's my pick of the 4.5 defenders. Not just that, I do think those upcoming fixtures for Newcastle are really good, particularly from an attacking perspective. I'll just go back to Lewis Hall so we can see what those fixtures are, right? They got Bournemouth, Tottenham, Wolves, Fulham. I think Newcastle could score in genuinely all of those games. And I think there are 4 Newcastle players that you can pick from. I think are really great picks. Gordon, Isak, Hall, and actually Nick Pope in goal, I think, is a very decent shout as well. I think all 4 of those guys could go into your team and score points. Nick Pope in goal, obviously spoken about Newcastle's clean sheet odds, but he's usually pretty good for saves bonus as well. Isak got an assist in game week 1 for the goal. And also, I genuinely back him to score 20 to 25 goals this season if he can stay fit. Anthony Gordon, we all know how good he is. I just think this game week 1 fixture with that unfortunate sending off of Fabian Schär kind of dictated the way the game was played. I'd like to think in games where they have 11 men, Newcastle will be a bit better and more dangerous going forwards. In terms of decent picks, I would say Trippier got benched obviously for game week 1. And then Jacob Murphy got subbed as a result of that red card on like the 13th. I can't remember when he got sent off, but it was early on in the game. So the fact that Murphy was the one that got subbed sort of suggests to me at least the pecking order of that front line. He had a really good preseason. I can't deny that, right? It was fantastic. But being the fact that he was the first outfield player to be subbed when that red card happened, I think sort of suggests where he is in Eddie Howe's pecking order. I don't think it was a surprise that he was probably going to be the first to be subbed. So yeah, I think those 2 are decent picks, but you know, they didn't really get all that many minutes in game week 1, so I can't really trust in them. And then genuinely, I'd probably avoid all the others. Fabian Schär is just too expensive when he does come back. 5.5 million is just way too much for him. If Gahey comes in, he could be a good option, but it doesn't look like that move's... Well, I don't know if that move's going to go ahead, to be honest. Crystal Palace driving a real hard bargain for Newcastle to get him. So yeah, genuinely, I'd probably avoid all the other Newcastle players. Right, another team with some really good upcoming fixtures, clean sheet odds and projected goals according to both 11FI and DraftHound and Man City. Now, they haven't played yet, right, in Game Week 1. I'm recording this on Saturday evening before they play the Chelsea game. But I think it's pretty safe to say that Man City are a good team. And when they have favourable fixtures, they're worth targeting. Now, I know most people are set on their team and will probably want to roll their transfer for Game Week 2. But if you're in a position where you need to make a move, I do think if you can get a Man City player in, if you're not already tripled up, they're probably the best team to target before they get into Champions League action, etc. and see some rotation. Ipswich, West Ham and Brentford. In 2 games, they've got over 50% odds of keeping a clean sheet, which means DraftHound consider them more likely than not to keep a clean sheet. And then the other game is 48% against Brentford, which is basically 50% anyway, right? Then on the flip side, their odds of scoring over 2 goals against Ipswich is 59%. And they're basically 50-50 to score over 2 goals against West Ham and Brentford as well. And you can see here the projected goals from 11FI. They're expected to get 3.18 goals against Ipswich, 2.13 against West Ham, and 2.64 against Brentford. So they're predicted basically to keep a clean sheet in all 3 games and score more than 2 goals in all 3 games. So to me, that's a really attractive option. Obviously, we all know with Man City, there's going to be some rotation. And this is probably where I'd say I sort of sit in terms of a ranking of the Man City players. I think there are 4 great picks amongst their squad at the moment. I'd say Haaland, Guardiola, Foden when he's back, Kevin De Bruyne. I do think with them selling Alvarez and Bob being injured, Kevin De Bruyne becomes a bit more of an attractive prospect. I do think it means his attacking output will probably improve just because there are less players around him to get the attacking returns. He's going to have more responsibility. I also think with just less options in the squad, you know, Alvarez and Haaland started together quite a lot last season. I do think Kevin De Bruyne is going to get more minutes. I really like him as an option. In fact, I'll talk about him a little bit in a second. And then in terms of decent picks, Ederson, he's going to get obviously clean sheets because Man City are going to get clean sheets, but he doesn't make all that many saves, which kind of detracts from me considering him an option, I would say. You want a goalkeeper in my mind that keeps clean sheets and gets saves bonus. Kyle Walker is probably the one defender you can back to play the most minutes. But again, I just don't like Man City defenders because he'll probably play the most minutes, but he's not really going to play 38 games in my mind. And then Rodri, once he's back, I think is a decent pick. He got a very decent level of attacking returns this season. But I just think because there are 4 options I would consider to be better than him, I'd only really consider him a decent pick from that perspective. And then genuinely, I'd probably avoid all the other players from the team. So we got then a little case study on Kevin De Bruyne. We all know he's one of the best and just most important players in that Man City squad when he's fit. And with Alvarez gone, Bob being injured, Foden being eased back in, I think that's going to be really good for his minutes. Obviously, he's proven to be injury prone in recent seasons. Pep has managed his minutes and it's been a hamstring. And usually when a player does a hamstring, that can mean it can kind of reoccur. And his returns, he got 14 of them in 15 starts last season, which on the face of it is really good, but they're more weighted towards assists than goals. And obviously in FPL, particularly with a midfielder, assists are less points bearing than goals. You get 5 for a goal from a midfielder, 3 for an assist. So that's nearly, half the points. So it does make a bit of a difference, but 14 returns in 15 starts for a player that's only 9.5 million this season. I think it's the cheapest De Bruyne has ever been since, obviously, he's burst onto the scene, I guess, at Man City. I think he's a really great option. And then also, I would consider Phil Foden a good option too. I do think he's probably back and in contention to start for Ipswich. We'll obviously get more info. We need more info, and we'll probably get it before the game, in between game weeks 1 and 2. Again, similar to Kevin De Bruyne, right? He's one of the best and most important players in that Man City team. With Alvarez gone, Bob being injured, I think it's going to be really good for his minutes. And when you compare him to Kevin De Bruyne, Foden's returns are always more weighted towards goals, which is more obviously points bearing, like we spoke about. And I would say Foden, considering, Pep said he's not ready for game week 1, he still might not be ready for game week 2, but it does mean that amongst engaged managers, Foden's going to be relatively low owned, and having the option to bring in Phil Foden as a differential, if it is for Ipswich at home or West Ham away or Brentford at home, those expected points from Fantasy Football Hub there are really, really strong. I think he could be a really good option and probably a little bit of a differential as well. I do also really like the upcoming Liverpool fixtures. The Man United game could go either way for me. Man United did look a lot better defensively, I would say, against Fulham than they had been in last season basically. But Liverpool always seem to go to Old Trafford and score goals. So yes, clean sheet odds wise for Liverpool might not be all that good, but I still back them to score goals. And when you look at their next 4 game weeks and the projected goals according to 11ify, they're predicting them to get more than 2 goals in all of their next 4 fixtures. So from an attacking perspective, you've got to think Liverpool are going to be pretty good. And in terms of the players from Liverpool that I would pick, I'd probably consider Jota a great pick now. I do think that Slot has kind of made clear that he's going to be first choice in that front line. So I'd probably move Jota into the great picks category, but I still have a little bit of minutes doubt around all of the Liverpool forwards, basically, apart from Salah. So I'll put Jota at the top of the great picks, and Luis Diaz can be in there as well, but just don't get all that excited about Diaz. I think the great picks from Liverpool are just Salah and Trent, right? And then it's around the decent ones, really. I think most people will, if they don't have them already, will be looking to get Salah and Trent. But outside of that, I think Jota's probably third best, followed by, if he gets minutes, Darwin Núñez. I don't mind Van Dijk. Quansah, really unfortunate what happened to him, getting removed at half-time. I don't really know what went on there. Was he injured? Was he, left out of the team because he did something bad? Slot didn't like it. Certainly didn't look the case. I'd say he's actually one of Liverpool's best players in that first half. Andy Robertson, I just feel like he's on the decline a bit, which is quite unfortunate, really. And I just don't think he's going to do quite as well as Trent this season. I know if you watched any of my pre-season videos, I actually picked Robertson in a couple of my drafts because he produced better underlying data than Trent did last year. I just don't think you can bank on Robertson playing as many games. I just don't think he's as good as Trent, basically. Alisson is perfectly decent. I think he keeps an average amount of clean sheets and makes a lot of saves. He's just quite expensive. And Szoboszlai, I think he'll get an average amount of returns, but you could probably just do better for that price. So yeah, I would say pickable Liverpool players for me, ones that I would definitely consider in my team. I'd go Salah, Trent, Jota and Van Dijk. Those would probably be my 4. And with those, we'll just go back to it. With those upcoming fixtures they've got, really decent clean sheet odds apart from the Man United game. And then their odds and projected goals are great. I think from an attacking perspective, they're going to do really well. Right, fine. This might be a bit of a controversial one to finish things off, but the next 4 fixtures for Chelsea, I think, are pretty good. Wolves, Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and West Ham. Their clean sheet odds are semi-decent. 38, 38, 38 and 36. I'd say that's pretty good. Usually when I go through the clean sheet odds on my Ultimate Guide video series, I say I'd be comfortable starting defenders with over 30% clean sheet odds. Look at that. They're all over 30% for the next 4, right? And their projected goals are not bad. I would predict them to score a couple of goals in most of those games. I don't think Wolves are all going to be all that good this season. Crystal Palace are decent, but they're at Stamford Bridge. Could lose Mark Gahey. Bournemouth, yeah, I think they could score in that game. And then West Ham, don't really know what you're going to get with West Ham yet. We'll see how they play in Game Week 1. I'm recording this just as they're playing Aston Villa, actually. But I do think Chelsea could be quite interesting. Once they get that Man City fixture out of the way in Game Week 1, which hasn't happened at the time of recording this video, I think for the next 4 game weeks, they could be pretty decent. The one obvious question with Chelsea, though, is who do you pick and what does their first choice 11 actually look like? I'd say Palmer and Nkunku are probably the only two players I'd consider to be great picks. Obviously, Cole Palmer's going to play every game. Nkunku should get decent minutes and be good from an attacking perspective. Reece James is obviously injured, suspended for a few games anyway with what happened to him last season, so Gusto's going to get some game time. I think he could be quite decent. Reece James is in training though, I believe, after his what minor setback with his hamstring or something. Nicholas Jackson, I spelled his name wrong, called him Jack on there. He could be pretty decent if he plays. I just think that Chelsea front line is really hard to predict. I do think the team that he goes with against Man City will kind of set the scene for the season and show who kind of his favourites are in each position. And then maybe first choice goalkeeper as well. The thing is with Chelsea, they've got 3 goalkeepers that could potentially be first choice. So yes, I said, 4 fixtures coming up, we'll just go back to it. 4 fixtures coming up are actually quite decent. But also, only 2 players I'd really pick from Chelsea until we see the lineup for Man City and how they get on in that game. That might help us decide who could be a bit more nailed on from that Chelsea 11. But yeah, fixtures-wise, they look good. It's just the question of who actually plays. All right, and that's the end of the video. I thought that'd be a useful little one to make for you. I know most people have decided on their teams, don't necessarily want to make any transfers going into game week 2, but a lot of stuff has already happened. You might well be needing to do that. So hopefully with some of the stuff I've explained there over fixtures, some cheaper players, some more expensive ones, etc. Some of that might hit or I might miss with you, but some of that might hit and you might be interested in it. So if you did enjoy the video and find it useful, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating. You should be subscribe, get my words out. Subscribe to the Goal and Goal channel, which should be just there. And let me know in the comments your opinions on some of the players that I've spoken about there. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.